Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Q&A for Module 3, Week 2. And we have two great questions that came our way this week. One is about, I'm just going to read it to you because it's really interesting. I really want to commit to a healing process, but I procrastinate. What can I do? And we hear this a lot, really, really a lot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, Stephanie, do you have any thoughts about this? I'm having some thoughts of my own, but I want to hear yours first.
My first thought is join the club. We know a lot about procrastination. I know a lot about procrastination personally. Um, okay, but yeah, my the thing that comes to mind for me specifically with this question is like with the healing process. I want to commit to a healing process. Okay, when you think about committing to a healing process, what does that feel like to you? What does that look like to you? Like, that sounds really big, right? A healing process. It sounds like it's going to be very big and grand and there's a lot to it, and I would imagine, I mean, for me, when I'm thinking about something that I want to embark on, when it seems like a really big task or a big journey or a big thing that I want to write or that I want to begin, um, that can cause me to kind of shut down and thereby procrastinate on it. So probably my best advice would be to realize that a healing journey, first of all, is going to be divided up into small little steps, bite-sized segments. Um, because first of all, change doesn't happen overnight, and it's much easier and much better when you take it in small chunks, right? So if you just realize that from the get-go, and you don't look at it as this big thing, like, because a lot of times when we think we want to embark on a healing journey, we think, oh, I've got so much that I want to change about myself, or I have so many habits that I want to let go and turn towards something else, and I don't even see how that could be possible from this point of view, because it feels
Yeah.
so big and like so much.
Mhm.
So I would say just keep in mind that any kind of healing journey or process or anything you're about to embark on, you can take it in small, tiny little segments, little micro segments even. And so first, make yourself feel better by recognizing that. And then think about what is the first step that I can make, the smallest first step that I can
Mhm.
make. If it's look for a therapist, if you decide you want to do this, in the therapy capacity. I'm just speaking generally, not,
Mhm.
this person who asked, because the
Absolutely.
person who asked is already part of, you know, but so
Yeah.
like in general, like is that the route you want to take? Is it that you feel like you want to start some kind of a physical practice, like a yoga practice or a meditation practice or something? First, decide what is the first step that you
Mhm.
want to take, and it can be a tiny step, and then commit to doing that. And then just see what happens from there,
Yeah.
small steps. That's my best advice. Eliza, what do you
That's
think?
great. That's totally great. Everything that you said is so valuable, and it's so what I was thinking about too, because sometimes people think of these giant tasks like I'm going to heal or
Mm-hmm.
like I am going to change careers, but it's like
Right.
what does that look like? That looks like a lot of little steps that feel much more manageable
Mm-hmm.
than the gigantic end goal, even though it's great to keep your eyes on the prize.
Right.
And the other thought I was having is when you're procrastinating, there's resistance there. So think about what the resistance is really about. Is it the fear of
Yes.
change? Is there
Yes.
grief there that's going on? You really
Right.
want to heal, you really want a different life, but not knowing what that looks like or feels like. We tend to, sort of like shy away from something that is very unfamiliar.
Right.
So maybe just sit with that resistance a little bit, even if it feels physically uncomfortable. See if you can
Mm-hmm.
stay there for a couple more seconds,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of see what that comes up, what that brings up for
Mm-hmm.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, making change, there's so many emotional components to it. So it's not just about, again, like doing things like, okay, I want to do this and do that. But there are, any kind of emotional, psychological blocks that are there, are
Hmm.
going to make you resistant. And you're right. A
Absolutely.
lot of, that has feeds into procrastination then. So yeah, really good point. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, something that we see a lot in our clients is they want to be this healed, grounded, happy person, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time they don't know who they are
Mm-hmm.
in that yet. They only know who they are in the now, with the fears, with the
Exactly.
procrastination, with reliving
Right.
trauma over and over. It feels
Right.
very uncomfortable, but at the same time they know the rules of the game
Exactly.
where they're
Yeah.
now. So,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too when you're talking about that, like, okay, um, for example, I don't want to be anxious anymore. I don't want anxiety to rule my life. Okay, let's say that's part of this change that you want to embark on. So really
mhm.
sitting with who am I without the anxiety, right? Who will I be without it? Because you're right, there's probably some kind of grief process that has to happen to let that anxiety go. There's a reason that you attach to it in the first place,
Mhm.
right? As some
Yeah.
kind of coping defense, whatever it is. And so, imagining who am I without this anxiety and then preparing to release it.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah,
Absolutely. When struggle has been your companion
exactly.
for as long as you remember, it's
Right,
tough to think of yourself without it,
right,
even if
exactly.
you know that you really want to be without it. So
Right.
all we're saying is exploring small steps, the
Hmm.
changes will come,
Right.
tending to all these different layers.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and speaking of layers and changes, the next question is also very connected.
Okay.
Um, so this person said, when I try to not listen to my inner critic gets even louder.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
can I do? What can I do? And this comes up so much in our work, so much.
Right. What we resist persists.
Yes.
Okay. So the more you try to ignore, wait, what was the word that they
Try to
used?
not listen.
Not listen. Okay. So the more you ignore, not listen, turn away from, try to repress or push down, it doesn't make the inner critic go away. It just makes it like a struggle for you to keep it down. And eventually it's just going to get so loud and take over. So my advice actually is to turn towards it, listen to it, hear what it has to say, but in a different way than you've done before. So maybe open up a dialogue with it like it is a separate entity, because it really is a separate entity that started on the outside of you that you then internalized and as another voice within you. But
Yeah.
the inner critic wasn't there with you, when you were born at all times. It
Hmm.
came in because you heard it and then you internalized it. So recognize it as a separate entity and listen to what it's saying, but in a with the intention of actually having a conversation with it and questioning it. you know Question its relevance and its truth. Okay, your inner critic is telling me that I'm no good. Well, I've been believing that for all these years, but really, why, where did you come from and why are you telling me this, and then why did I believe this, and how is this serving me to believe this? Does it
Yeah.
keep me from being, out there and being vulnerable? Does it keep me kind of down and not, coming into my own power, expressing myself, leaving myself open to criticism? So explore with the inner critic, dialogue with it. That would
Hmm.
be my suggestion, rather than trying to not listen to it.
Yeah.
Um, Listen to it, but then question it and challenge it.
Exactly. That is such amazing advice, because some people, the knee jerk reaction is I won't listen. And then when we say listen to our clients who don't really know this work yet,
Mhm,
they're
mhm.
like, well, why? That they get so confused. They think that we're telling them to give in or to
Right.
believe. And we're like, that is in no way what
No,
we're saying.
no, no.
What we're
Listening does
saying
not equal
is
believing. Listening
exactly,
equals dialoguing and then challenging. right? Yeah.
Exactly. And empowering yourself, the more you dialogue, the more you will realize that there is no
Mhm.
basis
Right.
there, you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
It's like if you're talking to a bully, they're trying to make you feel bad.
exactly.
So it's yeah. And of course this work is very deep, very
Hmm.
complex, and that's why we love walking you through the
Right.
steps to
Exactly.
deal with your inner critic, to really
Right.
reframe. It's not about canceling the inner critic,
Right.
releasing the inner critic, it's about reframing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, because some people have the illusion that once they work on the inner critic goes, you never hear from him again, him, her, they,
Hmm.
that's not the case. And then when the inner critic comes back out a few months later, a year later, they're like, oh my God, I thought it was gone. It's like, there's no such thing as parts of the self leaving. You just
Right. Right.
reframe how they function in your inner society, basically.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Every once in a while, she'll pop up for me, and I'll be like, "All right, what's up, bitch?" Like, recognizing it as I know exactly who she is. I know her voice. I know what she's trying to do.
Yeah,
But trying to be like, "Oh, quiet, 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 shut up, shut up." It's not going to make her go away.
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
so interesting that you say that because I feel like for me recently, the inner critic, like whenever I try to ease into things, my inner critic pops up and says, well, you really think it's going to be that easy?
Uh huh.
Yeah,
Uh
it's
huh.
so interesting. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I want to like think about that and sit with that. Like, why do I have this belief that everything has to be hard? I mean, many things are hard. We have worked so
Right.
hard our whole life, but does
Absolutely.
everything have to be hard?
Right.
It's interesting. This has been
Exactly.
my latest with my
Yep.
inner critic. Like, oh, you think it's going to be that easy? And I'm like, well,
Right.
can it be? Let's
Right.
think about this.
Exactly.
Let's
And
talk about it.
always recognizing that this inner critic is an unreliable narrator, just always yapping
Hmm.
and yapping, trying to pull you back into old maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, whatever,
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And a key
you
element
have to believe it
here,
is truth. Yeah.
totally, totally.
Yeah.
And something that the inner critic will do, just like bullies do, is that it'll take something that has a little bit of truth to kind of like hook you in
Exactly.
and then
Right.
build mount around it a lot of stuff that is very false, like exaggerate, create a lot of negativity. Like the
Right.
truth might be that maybe you have to improve how you play the violin a little bit. That could
Mm-hmm.
be a truth. But for
Mm-hmm.
someone to say, oh, the way that you play the violin really sucks and you'll never get anywhere, that's
Right.
all false. They took a small
Exactly.
truth that is very much workable and very much the
Right.
reality for many and can
Right.
create a lot of positive motivation
Exactly.
and just shot all over it basically and built a
Right.
prison around it. So
Exactly.
that's
Yep.
that's the kind of work that we want to do. Take you to the good core, make it positive,
Mm-hmm.
eliminate all the negativity, eliminate all the traps.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good questions this week.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. And we'll see you next week
See you next
for
week.
more questions.
Yep.